Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, my precious pack, and welcome back once more to VEGA Conflict. As within the previous video, as I said, I would like to discuss the upcoming Altairian Dreadnought. Fleet fitting potential, entertainment potential, which is going to be the big selling point for me because I see a lot of entertainment from the ship that we haven't even had a chance to see yet. Though what we've been told and hinted at thus far is more than enough information to finally talk about it, as well as a few things I've asked PTC as to whether he can answer yes or no based on his non-disclosure agreement. Along with that, I am actually looking forwards to this ship, and I'll explain why later, but for now, let's go over the aesthetics of it, as well as its ships. And I'm referring to the mini ships that it will be spawning, and yes, they are being referred to so far as mini ships, even though from what I understand they're going to be a Corvette playstyle, even though the player will not be able to use them or control them. They will spawn on their own and go out and attack, and the only thing that I'm curious is are they going to behave like squadrons? If we target a ship, will they re-target to whatever we tell them to attack? So we can focus fire on a certain thing at extreme ranges. What is the acquisition routine to acquire more of these microships? Alternatively, that is if they're not part of the overdrive, which I don't think they're going to be because so far they've been referred to as having levels and having their own stats, or I've gotten that mistaken and it's various levels based on the overdrive. But if they're individual ships that we can equip and choose what damage type they have, such as one being built up for kinetic, one being built up for energy, something like that, it would be interesting to see if we could mix and match them or what their general will be. But that's going to be the main selling point, is the fact that it will be spawning additional ships. The number of ships has not been disclosed yet, but if I had to guess, it would be more than 4. Because if it only spawns 2, what's really the point? Because squadrons can do effectively the same thing that the ships would be able to do. And if they have a lower value of health than the drones already do, then there's not really much of a point in changing over to them because they'll die just as quickly as the squadrons do. So it doesn't really make sense in that regard. So, onto the aesthetics. What can I confirm? Well, I asked PTC if he had, well, Playmaker. I need to stop calling PTC as the clan. I asked Playmaker if the ship had any animate movement whilst idle. And before anybody asks what that means, previously in the game we had a few ships that were that had animate reactions to certain actions, such as the start of the match. One would open up the wings, such as the Dominion, or in the case of the Covenant Cruiser, as it accelerates, the wings would fold back, reducing the drag behind the ship and effectively reducing the profile of the ship to allow for higher speed. Things like that. He said no, so right off the bat it's going to be a static ship, just like the Behemoth and the Segfault, with no unique animations to it aside from whatever it may have for movement, which isn't really special because most of the ships only leave a trail, which is a bit of a disappointment because I actually was hoping to have the first animated ship again in the game for quite a while, but no luck on that. So what to expect from it? Well, we know that it has a spawning mechanic and it will be spawning mini ships, and depending on the number that it spawns, I have a few fittings as well as a few entertaining little tidbits. First being a farming or PvE build, which I will talk about when it's actually released, but for now I have 2 builds, one that's for fun and it's just a maximum number of ships that a player can have, depending on the number of ships it spawns. By default, players have 6 ships in their fleets. Well, with this, we'll be able to have more because it will be spawning some in combat. The number of ships will most likely correlate to its mark level, such as the segfault, where it gains increased, where it begins with one, just one, hangar bay, and at Mark 5 it gets its fourth. My guess is that the Altairian Dreadnought will be similar and have one or two to begin with and gain more through mark upgrades. But I think that it will be a novel ship, primarily, to begin with, until we begin learning specialized fittings for it and things like that. But my primary use that I want to see is one thing that I've always wanted to see and that I've brought up multiple times, and that is to increase the active number of player ships in combat. And what that means is more than 6. Well, this does exactly that. The precise number is not known at this time, but again, I'm guessing that it's going to be at least 4 at the max mark level. Possibly 2 at Mark 1, or possibly more. It just depends on what its combat fitting is. Now, if it's going to be heavily built up around the focus of spawning, my guess is that they're going to give it 6 hangar slots and allow them to be used that way. Alternatively, if it doesn't have hangar slots and instead spawns them naturally via overdrive or something like that on a certain pattern or a reaction to enemies entering fire arc or something, then it will be a little bit different. But again, regardless of how they're acquired, my expectation is 2 to 4 and 4 to 6. If it is actually more than that, I will be impressed. If it is less, well, I'm already setting the bar fairly low with 2 to 4. But with that said, time to talk about the fittings. What am I thinking of doing with it? Well, the first thing that I want to do with it is I want to playtest it. And depending on how many coins I get during the upcoming Alliance War, it will depend on whether I farm it in day 1, in roughly 2.5 to 3 hours, depending on how long I decide to put into the game in a single sitting. It'll probably be split up into 3 1-hour intervals, one in the morning, one in the evening, and one before going to bed, so I can have the ship ready by the morning. The next thing is going to be exactly what I'm going to have in the fleet. Now, any Dreadnought Mark 1 you can have a fairly good fleet with if you build them correctly. What I intend on doing is actually building up a for fun fleet with this ship. And it is to actually push the limit of the player ships to over 6 due to the natural spawns of the Orator. And I want to just have a little bit of fun with doing essentially what the AIs have always done to us, and that is swarm tactics. And in this case, I can actually see one ship in specific that we have received recently, the Zeus, being extremely ideal due to its relatively low weight, low fitting, and relatively low build time. In other words, I'll be able to build a fleet of them, if I don't already have one prepared, just for them. It's going to be quite an entertaining ship because I could see 2 people doing a co-op target with carefully specialized fleets just for the co-op targets, and using this fleet tactic and reversing what is typically us being swarmed to death, or alternatively for the PvE farming fleet, we're going to be using the Dreadnought's spawns as decoys, because if they count as mini ships, theoretically NPC targets will engage them before they'll engage our actual ships, because they should still count as a class of ship, indicating that we should be able to use them as decoys, so the NPC will stop to fight them, and all we have to do is just remember, outrange them. Now, outranging them, we could use any number of ships. We could use battleships or destroyers, but either way we're going to be essentially distracting them with the spawns from the Dreadnought. While the Dreadnought will actually have it moving backwards away from the target. And the speed of the spawns is unknown to me at this time, because they have dropped a lot of hints and stuff like that, but I've picked up what I could while I was active on the Discord, so I may have missed some stuff if I did bring it up in the comments section. So, you know, if you have a full list of what's been brought up, or if you want to just copy and paste it, 'cause you for some reason have all of that offhand, feel free to share it below. I didn't leave the command deck, I'm still right here. Don't you joke yourself. I'm just rambling on. But with that said, the number of ships that we'll be able to have will increase via this ship, and as for the aesthetic, well, as I was mentioning earlier, it's not going to be animate, but one thing was confirmed, it's not going to be a carbon copy and a reskin of the Altairian mothership that we have already fought, which is the Oligarch one. It's going to be a different ship as far as I understand, which is actually something that I'm going to look forward to, because honestly, I don't like the look of the mothership, but if it's going to be a different ship, I'll be a little bit more content. Now, on to the final thing that I want to talk about it, and that is the name. Of all the things you could have named it, why the Orator? Because the first thing I think of when I think of Orator is a public speaker, or the first sentence that pops in my head is, one who talks. That's not what I want to think of when I think of the name of a Dreadnought. And I suggest in the previous video a few different names and things like that, and one thing that I would just like to see change right now, I don't even want hints or a picture of the ship, is for the name to change. And I have in mind just a few names. The Olympus, the Olympian, the Titan, and there's actually a few others that people also began to recommend because they watched the video fully through, so feel free to check out the previous video, specifically the comment section, to see the name suggestions. And the next thing I'll be talking about later today will actually be the fleet XP changes, because as good as they look, it seems like the development team was going to try and do something good, however, it's riddled with a lot of issues. And the first being that they want to change the NPC targets to follow in suit with all of this, and this includes Dreadnought targets. And our Dreadnoughts are going to be dropped down to around level 110 for when they're fully fitted, Marks, Elite, and stuff like that. Well, that becomes an issue for fleet gathering XP, because if that becomes our new top level fleet, and the NPC fleet is only going to be 10 above that, which is going to be level 120, then we have a little bit of an issue. And I'm going to share that issue right now, and that is the Fleet Commander XP gain. Because for anyone who doesn't remember, the current values of the Fleet Commanders is based off of their current level, and the level of the target that they hit. And what you gain will be strictly moderated by that. And what I mean by this is it follows suit like this. If I were to, say, hit a level 150 target with a level 0 commander, they would gain a large amount of XP. Whereas if I hit them with a level 75 commander, the XP value would be decreased, because right now, in effect, there is a table in place of plus 100 minus 50. Targets that go up towards the 100 levels above the fleet commander provide heavy XP boosts, but under this new system we're going to lose an extremely large number of the high level targets, because if the new high level of the 150 gets dropped down to 120 due to the rework, then we're going to be losing 30 levels of effective XP that we're not going to be able to find and farm elsewhere, because it's just no longer going to exist. And it's going to revert the fleet commanders back to what they were before, where it's going to take an extremely long amount of time to rank up a fleet commander, because this was an issue that I was thinking of bringing up previously, but I didn't think they would rework the XP value to be this horrendous thing without actually considering the fleet XP value for the commanders. And it seems like, as I said, they were aiming to do something good, but the thought process is just riddled with issues. So if it was up to me, I would tell them to postpone the update until they've actually considered as many options as is possible, and consult some of the players, so if there's anything that is brought up that they didn't think of, that it's taken into account as soon as possible. Again, I see the fleet XP change being good, but it's also bringing a lot of issues. Okay, back to the Dreadnought for just a little bit more. So, we know that the name is the Orator, we know it's going to be spawning ships, we know it's going to be a primarily static ship with no unique animations occurring on the ship itself whilst it's moving around in combat. And it's, from what I pick up, it's going to most likely have hangar bays that will be used just as any other ship does, but that's going to most likely be taken up by the mini ships that will be spawning. If it isn't and it's all part of the overdrive, then the hangar bays will most likely play a heavy part in how the spawns work, depending on range or something like that. My guess is it'll be based off of range to begin with, but only time will tell unless the moderators are given the okay to talk about the ship a little bit more heavily. But other than that, the only thing that I'm going to probably do is I'm going to do this. Playmaker, if possible, refit the Orator on the preview server and have it go up against the level 100 segfault target and do your best combat fitting as well as give it a few escort ships. Let me know if it's funny or not. I don't want to know if it wins the fight, I don't want to know if it loses the fight, I just want to know if it's funny. Because again, my primary focus is entertainment. That's all, everybody. Let's go ahead and let's get a discussion going in the comment section about the upcoming Dreadnought, which, according to all release posts that we've seen, as well as what we've heard from Playmaker, it should be released in the second week of July. Hopefully we can pull Kickstar's arm, get them to release a preview of it a little bit sooner than that afterwards. Well, specifically the dev team. Pull their arm a little bit, see if we can get them to leak the model, potentially the models for its mini ships, and a few things like that. Oh, I just want to quickly crack this joke. I swear if its mini spawns are flying backwards, I will crawl through my screen, I will smash whoever's keyboard programmed it that way. But that's it, everybody. Let's go ahead and, as I said, start a discussion in the comment section, and let's get the thoughts rolling on the Altairian Dreadnought. The name, again, is my primary eye catcher because it just doesn't seem right to me. There were so many names that could have been so much better in my eyes, such as the Olympus, the Olympian, the Titan. There's just so many. And especially following up an Altairian ship like the Zeus, literally the Zeus. You can't get any more epic than that for an Altairian ship. And then you follow it up with the Orator. One who talks. Oh boy. Alright, everybody. Be safe out in the void. Have a good time. And as always, I will see you in the next video.